So I'm standing here at the Cy Twombly Gallery in Houston, Texas. It's just finishing up a thunderstorm. And it was at this gallery, which is filled with the work of Cy Twombly, who's a late 20th century American artist. It was at this gallery that I stumbled upon a line of poetry written on a sculpture. And the line of poetry says, "Honor to those who in the life they lead define and guard a Thermopylae." This line, which I read a couple of years ago, would put me on a crash course with one of the great Greek poets of the 20th century. That Greek poet is Constantine Cavafy, and I want to tell you about him today. Constantine Cavafy is one of the most fascinating poets of the 20th century. He's not as well known in the West as T.S. Eliot or Sylvia Plath, but he's beloved in the Greek-speaking world, and in his own day he won the admiration of E.M. Forster, W.H. Auden, Eliot himself, and others. Constantine Cavafy was born in Alexandria, Egypt. He was the son of Greek parents who had themselves come from Constantinople. Alexandria had been a hub of Greek culture and language since antiquity, and Kavafi grew up aware of his unique heritage. Greek in language and ethnicity, North African in placement. His first name the same as the greatest Byzantine emperors, his last name from the Arabic. His middle name, Petru, he shared with his father, and back through history to St. Peter himself. The Kavafi family enjoyed the benefit of Petru's connections in business. However, Petru died when Constantine was 7, after which Kavafi's mother moved the family to England. There, Constantine became adept in English and even composed juvenile English poems with his brother. But funds were short, and the Kavafis returned to Alexandria eventually, where Constantine spent most of the rest of his life. Kavafi eventually got a job as a clerk for the government, which he held for many years, but his most treasured work was that of poetry. From the late 1880s through the early 1930s, he created a body of work that reveals a man of many fascinations and many facets. Let's look at some of them. The first thing we notice in Kavafi's poetry is an intense, lifelong fascination with Greek history. One thing critics note about Kavafi is that he seems free of the Western European prejudice against post-classical Greece. English historians like Edward Gibbon were famous for praising the classical Athens of the 5th century BC with its Greek tragedians, historians, and philosophers, and then criticizing and dismissing as uninteresting the whole rest of Greek history, including the Hellenistic era and the whole 1,000-year history of Greek Byzantium after it. Kavafi did not have this prejudice. His poems are filled with perspectives that jump from 200 BC to 340 AD to 1000 AD, including characters as diverse as pagan emperors, pious saints, and Roman frat boys. This last characterization, the wild, lusty youth, brings us to another often noted aspect of Kavafi's poetry, bittersweet memories of love affairs. From Kavafi's love poems, we get the outline of wild nightlife that the poet lived, if his poems are to be believed, and the biographical information seems to indicate that he did have a party set that he would hang out with, including at brothels and other places. Poignant and pained meetings between lovers whose passion lasts only for a night, but is remembered for decades, fill many of his poems. Here's a good example titled, I've gazed so much. I've gazed so much. At beauty I've gazed so much that my vision is filled with it. The body's lines, red lips, limbs made for pleasure. Hair like something taken from Greek statues, always lovely, even when it's uncombed and falls a bit upon the gleaming brow. Faces of love, exactly as my poetry wanted it, in the nights of my youth, secretly encountered in my nights. Kavafi has a way of giving you pictures of people, especially young men, who are striving and passionate, but who are placed in the context of some greater irony, some counter-pressing fate. Let's look, for an instance, of a female character who experiences this in an early poem from 1898 called Prayer. The sea took into her depths a sailor's life. Unaware, his mother goes and lights a taper before the image of Our Lady, that the weather might be fair and his return speedy. While at the wind she always strains her ears, but as she prays the icon hears, solemn and full of mourning, knowing that the sun she awaits won't be returning. I love how this poem rhymes in couplets. I also love how clearly Kavafi understands and pities this mother. This poem is resonant with poems like Sappho's brother poem from the 7th century BC, long before Kavafi. It's the same in that both are a prayer for safe travels of a loved one, all the while knowing that those who travel are in the hands of the divine, and what we ask in our prayers may not turn out to be God's will. Speaking of God, Kavafi was, his youthful midnight trysts notwithstanding, a Greek Orthodox Christian, and his description of Christian piety would have come from first-hand experience of Orthodox Christian worship, lighting candles, saying prayers before an icon, priests, bishops, etc. When Kavafi was on his deathbed, suffering from cancer, the Patriarch of Alexandria, the most powerful bishop in that part of the world, came to visit him. It's said that Kavafi was at first surprised that the Patriarch came. Apparently someone else invited him. And Kavafi was on the brink of refusing to see the Patriarch. But then he had a change of heart. I don't know what was said between them, but Kavafi did confess to the bishop and receive the sacrament. I like to imagine that was one of the most poetic confessions the bishop ever heard. And given some of Kavafi's love poetry, perhaps a little shocking. One of the unique qualities of Kavafi as a poet was that he never published a book of poems in his life. His individual poems were published and loved widely in Alexandria and the whole Greek-speaking world, which ended up gaining him international fame. He did collect his poems into private notebooks, which are studied by scholars, but the poems were not published as a book that anyone in the public could buy until after his death. Now, of course, Kavafi's poems have been translated into many languages throughout the world. Speaking of Kavafi's international renown, I mentioned at the beginning of the video that I first discovered Kavafi's poems at an art gallery. The American artist Cy Twombly loved modern poetry and incorporated the opening lines of Kavafi's poem Thermopylae into his sculpture, titled also Thermopylae. Let's close by reading the poem in its entirety. Honor to those who in the life they lead define and guard a Thermopylae, never betraying what is right, consistent and just in all they do, but showing pity also and compassion, generous when they're rich, and when they're poor, still generous in small ways, still helping as much as they can, always speaking the truth, yet without hating those who lie. And even more honor is due to them, when they foresee, as many do foresee, that Ephialtes will turn up in the end, that the Medes will break through after all. This isn't the last video we're going to do on Constantine Cavafy, but I hope it's been a good introduction. If you're looking for good translators of Kavafi, I recommend Edmund Keeley and Philip Sherrard, who teamed up together to translate Kavafi in the 70s, and a more recent translation by Daniel Mendelsohn, which I've been quoting from for the first couple poems that we read here. Kavafi is a fascinating poet with many, many dimensions, some shocking, some difficult to understand, some that throw us toward our encyclopedias to figure out what bishop, what emperor, what saint he's referring to. But it's good work. Hi everybody, Dr. Timothy Bartell here. Thank you so much for watching this channel. As you just saw, if you watched this video, we just started our Greek poetry series, which I hope to continue throughout the end of the summer and into the fall. If you've been watching this channel for a while, or if you just found it and you think, how could I support knowing poetry? Well, head on over to our Patreon. I have a link in the video description below. Patreon You probably heard of it. If you haven't, it's a platform where people who follow content creators, whether on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, wherever, can monetarily support the creators that they care about. There are several different tiers of support. The names of the people who are going to show up right here are a few of my Patreon supporters. I'm so thankful to them. You know, support on Patreon isn't very expensive, but gathered together, it can make a big difference to those who want to keep making quality content, who want to keep improving their videos. I'm going to hold up for a second and hopefully not knock over my video recorder. This mic stand I was able to purchase because of the support of my Patreon followers. It's small things like this that can really make a difference in encouraging people like me to keep making the things that we make. I love talking about poetry. I love being on YouTube. And I thank you so much for watching. And those of you who already support me on Patreon, thank you so much. For those of you who want to support, if you subscribe and if you support and become a paying member, you get behind the scenes videos. You get longer unedited book reviews, rants on the state of publishing and poetry, things like that give you a little bit more behind the scenes of both this channel and the things that I care about and want to bring to you on a weekly basis on the YouTube channel. So once again, thank you so much for watching this channel. Head over to Patreon if you're interested, and thanks again for watching.